Back with another video, man. You already know what it is. Yeah.
Trip.
Hey, so man, you know we got another Time of Soul, man. The origins of woke, and like I told you, as we react to these, it's learning at the same time. So we're learning more and more and getting understanding as we listen and go through this with y'all. Because some of y'all are learning this at the same time, and some of y'all have already seen this, and y'all are excited about seeing us learn.
Yeah, I like it too, and I was going to say I really am loving and enjoying listening, to him and doing research too outside, of this in regards to something he's talking about.
Yeah.
And you get facts versus fiction. What people hear they say, or what they've been told versus getting a historian and then going and finding other historians and blah blah blah, and the story goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it.
So this is Time of Soul, the origins of woke.
Let's go. All right.
I think this really one. This really one I want to see.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yep.
The Vision of the Anointed. Now that's an interesting title. Who are the anointed?
They're the elite in the media, in politics, all of those who think that third parties ought to be making people's decisions for them. The subtitle is Self-Congratulation as a Basis for Social Policy. In other words, people who think that everything that's wrong with the country is due to the fact that other people are just not as smart as they are. And if only they could, or people like them could take over and make our decisions, we'd be so much better off.
But in early America, didn't this sort of educated class make the decisions for everybody?
As far as governmental decisions,
yeah.
But the government itself didn't make the decisions for everyone.
Uh-huh.
Now, you can't decide where your kid's going to school. You can't decide whether or not they can move a halfway house for drug users next door to you or whatnot.
It's out of your control. The government decides.
That's right.
Stuff.
The government decides too many things. They decide also how your children will be raised. You may have an idea about at what age children should be introduced to sex, and in what manner, with what kind of moral commitment.
You mean as a parent?
As a parent, yes. The schools have taken that over. By the time you even think about it, they've already had years, of showing.
They're passing out condoms to these kids.
Passing out condoms is not even the half of it. They're showing motion pictures of naked couples engaging in sex, both homosexual and heterosexual, in the 7th grade.
Wow, and this is 1995.
I saw that.
If you complain about it, that's considered to be censorship.
You can't pull your kid out of school and say they don't have to put up with this stuff. I guess you could, but you'd be
well, if you have a private school to put them in, but you have compulsory attendance laws, and if you don't have the money for private schools, then you're stuck.
Where did this country get off the track and decide that the federal government should make most of our decisions?
Well, it started to some extent in the New Deal, but I think the 1960s is sort of the golden age, if you want to put it that way, of this whole mindset. And that's what the book's about. It's about a mindset. It's not about a series of policies, but of showing how in policy after policy, those who think a certain way will try to take over other people's decisions.
How do you characterize the liberal philosophy today from the conservative philosophy?
Well, that's a tough one. I guess the main thing about the liberals, again, is that they think a program will do it. If there's something that they don't like in the society, you have set up a program and that will solve the problem. I think one of the words they use a lot is solutions. And I argue here and elsewhere that there are no solutions. There are just trade-offs. So, for example, when Ralph Nader launched his attack against the Corvair many years ago, he said it's an unsafe car and it has these safety problems and those safety problems. And in some respects, he was correct, not all. But the fact is, there were other things that a Corvair would do that made it safer than other cars. And on net balance, it was as safe as the rest of them.
Are you saying there are no solutions to our problems as Americans?
There are no solutions to anybody's problems. There are trade-offs. Safety is a classic example. Every year, so many hundreds of thousands of people are vaccinated against measles, smallpox, those kinds of things. Now, this saves several hundred lives, it's estimated. It also causes brain damage to about 30 kids a year. Now, there are no solutions in that. There are just trade-offs.
What about crime? Take crime as an issue.
Wow. You hear it?
Mm-hmm. No solutions, just trade-offs.
Trade-offs. And if you go against whatever their solution is, then you get attacked.
Can we solve the crime issue or fundamentally solve it so it's reduced?
Well, then that's a trade-off. You don't solve it. There will always be crime. There always has been, but you want to keep it down to some level. It's not this astronomical thing we have today. For example, the liberals right now are saying, crime has eased off in New York.
I'm sorry. On the side note, just like when people say, "Oh, we need gun control," I think that's bull crap. That's not the root of the problem. And then you start controlling guns too strong enough, now the people that really need them, the ones that be having a hard time getting them, and the people that don't need them be the ones that's getting them off the street. Now you having a hard, you were held up from getting one, and this person already got one. Now you done got,
and they coming to rob you.
They coming to rob you.
Yeah.
So gun control is trash.
I mean, it's a catch-22, but we truly believe in the right to bear arms, and that's until the end.
Just like in California, like I'm totally against the whole thing. So to have like an AK-47, let's say AK-47, like back home in Georgia, you can have one, that operates exactly how AK-47 is supposed to operate. But here in California, we have to get any weapons that are on that magnitude. It has this little block thing behind it, so you can't squeeze and they'd be automatic. So it has to be like, you can only shoot so many, and you have to, you know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of control on stuff, and I think it's stupid because you're not going to stop somebody who's got I'm gonna say illness, evil spirit, and from going out and taking that gun and still going to shoot somebody. I think that's not, gun control ain't nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
True. There were 6 times as much crime in New York a few years ago as there was in 1960. Now it's down to 5 times as much crime as there was in 1960. Now that's not what I regard as a great trend, unless it continues a lot more strong.
Liberals think we need more education, and we need to help people in the inner city more to cut down crime there. Conservatives would say we have to be tougher on crime. Is either of them correct?
Oh, I no. You see, the conservative view is really not a solution. It's a trade-off. It says, yes, it would be wonderful if we could do all these things to prevent crime in the first place. We just don't happen to be that smart. And so what we do, we put people behind bars who commit violent crimes. Now, a few years ago in East Palo Alto, which is not far from Stanford University, a minority community, low income, they had the doubtful distinction of being the murder capital of the United States in proportion to their population. The next year, murder and all sorts of other violent crimes dropped tremendous amount, 30, 40, 50% in 1 year. Now, that wasn't because they discovered the root causes of crime or because they worked out everything that was wonderful. They launched a campaign that put a lot of the bad guys behind bars. And when they were behind bars, they didn't commit as many crimes.
Source. Not to do with the weapons, it's the individual. And some people walk around here evil, and it ain't no state. It can't be out on. It ain't in their nature.
Well,
some people are doing evil deeds.
True. I feel like, but each individual is worth attempting to rehabilitate. It's going to be up to the individual if they allow themselves to be rehabilitated. Now, there are mental disorders and there are also brain disorders that sometimes will ensue individuals who have, increased emotions. And what happens when a person becomes an adult, whatever the psychotic drugs or whatever the drug that they have to have, antipsychotics rather, whatever they need, if they're not institutionalized, there's no one there to make them take the pill. But I mean, what's the percentage of that? So we have to take all these things in consideration. I don't know the statistics on this, but I would definitely say every situation that's horrible where it's been a mass murder or mass shooting, the person does not have a mental illness. But that's the first thing they want to lean on. Yeah. Because just because a person commits a heinous crime does not mean that they have a mental illness or have been diagnosed with a mental illness.
Yeah, we call them evil spirits over here. But it's... But yes.
So, okay, let's go. Here's some more facts.
Makes sense to me.
And the thing that it's more, even in a high crime area, the great majority of the people are not criminals. And so if you can just put your hands on those people who are raising all the hell in the community and take them out of circulation, the crime rate drops.
People say there's undue emphasis on African Americans for committing crimes. Is that true? Ed Koch wrote in a column here that the population is 25% African American in New York. 62% of the crimes are committed by African Americans. Is that and he says
I haven't checked these figures, but throughout the world, this is not unusual. Throughout the world, people are disproportionately represented in all kinds of different things. And it's true, obviously, in basketball. It's true in all kinds of other things. The main thing is not to keep people out of jail because they're one race or another, because when you do that, the people who are going to suffer the most will be the black community.
Where are you on affirmative action?
Against.
Why?
Well, you can only do one of two things. You can either just judge people individually, or you can judge them by groups. This whole notion that you're going to come out with a compromise, I would defy anybody to come out with a compromise on that. You're going to do one of those two things. Now, you can pretend to be doing other things, but that's all you're going to do. Those are the only two choices you really have in the end. Again,
that's true.
People who are the anointed think of this as a symbolic issue, and they want to be on the side of the angels. They don't ask, what are the consequences? Now, I've studied affirmative action programs around the world. One of the consequences is that those people who are more fortunate in the group that has the preferences, those people take the lion's share of the preferences. Very often, those at the other end of the scale, poorer people, actually fall further behind. That's true of blacks here. It's true of Malays in Malaysia. It's true of various groups in India. And there are reasons for that. You can say you must have certain proportions. Nothing is easier than for an employer who might otherwise locate, let's say, in the Bronx, to locate out in Provo, Utah, where he will be not near any black people, and therefore he will never have lawsuits, and the jobs will be in Provo, and people will wonder, why don't people, here have more jobs? It never seems to occur to liberals that other people are not blocks of wood, that when you set up certain incentives, they will react to them in certain ways. And when they do that, the result may be the opposite of what you set out to do.
How do the anointed refer to people they don't agree with?
All sorts of ways, but I think the main thing is they believe that you're not merely in error, but in sin. In other words, they can't believe that you're just mistaken. You must have sold out. You must be something warped about you.
You guys are for the rich.
He said it. I mean, something wrong with you, or are you in a sold out because you ain't on the agenda?
And because you're doing your own homework and you're not taking and you're going off facts versus fiction versus fluff versus what someone else is, says, versus doing the homework and making the observation and really looking at it from more than just one perspective. You just can't say, okay, this is this because this is what everybody else is saying or doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And anybody who does that, people look at you like you the Uncle Tom or you done sold out. But most time people that think like that are let's just be, they're stupid. Anyway.
But no, I mean, are non-thinkers. I was just thinking, I just heard in my spirit. You have thinkers versus non-thinkers. Yeah. The majority is going to be a non-thinker. They're going to go with what everybody else is saying.
Yeah.
Versus doing the homework themselves or thinking and say, wait, hold on, this don't even make no sense here.
Yeah.
But you got to think to do that.
Yeah.
Most people don't even like to read.
Yeah.
So let alone think.
Like if I were to go right now, go get me a 1776 shirt, people gonna automatically assume, oh, he an Uncle Tom or he done sold out. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's education.
Yeah.
You guys only care about the rich guys. Answer that. How do you respond? Liberal says conservatives only care about rich people.
Well, one of the things I go into in the book is that the whole notion of rich is ridiculous. That most Americans don't stay in the same income bracket, even for one decade. So the same guy who is, quote, rich now was 20 years ago probably in the bottom 20%. I mean, I was on a cruise recently, luxury cruise, and the guy said, if someone had told me when I was growing up that I would end up on a cruise like this, I would have said, get real, man. That very few people are in that same income bracket the whole time. Right. The genuinely rich and the genuinely poor, I would estimate to be no more than 3% of the American people.
Really?
Put together.
Really?
Yes.
Genuinely poor. Now, I'm seeing numbers like when they were talking about health care, they said, 30 million people couldn't afford it or something?
Several million of those were making more than $50,000 a year. So it's not. See, this is one of the things the anointed do. They never believe that people make choices. There are people who have the money. They prefer to put that money into a BMW rather than
a lot of young people didn't want health care. They were betting on their health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Another one.
Yeah.
He said that anointed woke feel like people can't make decisions. Like we're making decisions for everybody. Everybody having this issue, and that ain't true. People making choices.
Yeah.
They keep trying to protect them, and then that's just pulling us backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Especially my community, it pulls us backwards with that spoon feed and hand holding. We need to protect them. That puts us backwards.
Mm-hmm.
But
allows them to buy more stuff they want to buy. So it's not a question that they couldn't afford it. It's a question they don't choose to spend the money.
What about means?
Oh, and I got this other question. How does a person go about getting in stuff for affirmative action? You fill out affirmative action paperwork. How do people get in stuff for affirmative? I've never understood that.
No, I mean, it's like whatever the institution, well, institutions have them now since that law was passed. So it's based off of a certain number of minority groups are going to be accepted into this university or whatever based off of your skin color. If they don't have as many, it's like a poor. You got to allow these many number of people in based off of your affirmative action.
How would you know if you're in that?
I mean, I don't know if you'll know that or not, but if you get accepted and your scores ain't the best, and you were accepted based off of
I get you,
needing to have that one more person to be let in based off affirmative action,
yeah,
versus having high test scores.
Okay, I never really understood who qualified. You sign a paper. Yes, pull me in. I'm black, please.
Conservatives are mean-spirited. They're bigots. They don't like people.
Well, one of the things I tell people say, you're a very tough person. I'm not tough. Life is tough.
That's
I'm
right.
merely trying to acquaint you with those facts.
That's facts.
Back in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson announced a war on poverty.
Mm.
Am I wrong? But there are more poor people. I mean, in other words,
today than there were then, yes.
Yeah, there are more poor people.
Yes.
I mean, this was a hell of a war. We lost it, apparently, because for the last 30 years, we've been dumping money into these poverty programs.
Oh, absolutely.
Where's the money go?
Oh, it supports a whole industry of people who run those programs, who talk about those programs, research those programs, bureaucrats, and so on.
Doesn't help poor people.
No. The tragedy, you see, is that the anointed really want to make symbolic statements. And running these programs makes those symbolic statements. They don't really care if in the wake of affirmative action, for example, companies start locating away from minority communities so they don't even get involved in legal action. They don't care about that. They've made their statement on the side of the angels, and that's what's important.
Have you ever debated Jesse Jackson?
I have no idea.
You'd be willing to, I assume.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
I think that's too much showbiz.
It is. There are people who go and do this, and I'm doing less and less of it. And I tell them the story of an African boxing.
If he went against Jesse Jackson, he would have tore Jesse through the frame. It would have been embarrassing.
Who fought an Irishman in St. Patrick's Day in Dublin. And he lost his title on what the sports writers called a questionable decision.
Yes.
And so you have to know what forum you're talking about.
Right.
I saw Shelby Steele on with him, and I said, if Jesse Jackson and Shelby Steele each had to present a 2-hour lecture to an audience with an average IQ of 120, Shelby would wipe him out. But if they had 5 seconds each on Donahue, it would be Jesse Jackson all the way.
Right.
So everything depends upon the forum.
Is Jesse Jackson good for African Americans or not?
He's not. Good for himself.
Good for himself.
That's a fact, and that's what brought over Jesse Lee Peterson. You remember we were watching him at Uncle Tom? Mm-hmm. He said how he was for Democratic side. He supported Jesse, and then come to find out, Jesse was saying fight for this, but all his kids are in private school. Mm-hmm. He was like, but you stand out on the front line, but you really got something you doing different from your setup. Right. And he said after that changed him all the way. He started finding out that it was just more of a front. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. Yeah.
And that's true of most ethnic leaders in most groups, in most countries, in most periods of history. That what will serve his interest is to keep people paranoid, dependent upon him, dependent upon government. What will serve their interest is typically just the opposite.
Wow.
That's pretty interesting. So you're saying that the leaders, whatever group, wants the people to be poor and dependent on them as opposed to dependent on themselves.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this in the greatest cynicism in the academic world, where in many places, black organizations on campus have a say on who gets admitted. And they have turned down blacks with excellent credentials, both as students and as faculty members, for that very reason.
Who are the mascots of the anointed? You talk about the mascots of the anointed.
They're people whom they choose to back and whose rights are supposed to override other people's rights. The homeless are a classic example. I'm appalled when I see people out there in the street giving money to the home. I mean, able-bodied men. I think one of the classic pictures to me, it was in San Francisco, when there was this able-bodied white man out in the street begging, and there's this black lady coming along there, very modestly dressed, like she didn't have, but she's stopping to open her purse to give him some money, you know. And I thought, good heavens, have we really come to this? And we've been brainwashed by the anointed into thinking this is what we ought to do.
What do you say to guys who bum money off of you?
Not all of it can be repeated on the air, but the fact is they don't get any money.
They don't.
And people who complain now about all these people begging in the street, there's a simple answer. Don't give them money, and they won't be in the street.
When you wrote this...
Wow.
That's just like how it makes me think of L.A. Remember how we was giving things out to the homeless? Mm-hmm. And then the lady was like, you gotta ask our permission first or something, she says, and you come to find out that in L.A., homeless people can sue you for giving them stuff. That is definitely a liberal
if it
creation.
Their health, like peanuts and all that kind of stuff, peanut allergies.
Yeah, if it gives me an allergy, I'll sue you. First of all, is any of my documentation on this bag I gave you? So how you gonna find me?
But I mean, what does the Word of God say about him helping his people?
You're supposed to help his people, but it's ways to help, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give money. You might need to give them something that they need. Yeah. But I have to be spirit led. I have to be God led to say to give this person something. And a lot of people, and most people, I'm not. It's some people,
What were you trying to accomplish with the book, and did you do it? Were you nailing liberals for 30 years of social policy? What were you trying to say?
I was trying to reveal the thinking behind that, the kinds of assumptions, the kind of world that exists inside their mind, and therefore why those assumptions are so dangerous in the long run. It's not just the policies mentioned in that
They
book.
think they're better than everybody else.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. And that's what makes them dangerous. Even all the policies that are mentioned there, 20 years from now, those policies may not be the policies we're concerned about. But that mindset will still be there. And what makes them tremendously dangerous is that facts that contradict what they believe are simply ignored or evaded.
Where does the press fall into this as the anointed group? Are they part of the anointed?
Oh, absolutely. They're a major part of it, because one of the reasons that people don't get many of the facts that go against what's believed is that the press doesn't choose to publicize those facts.
Give me an example of something the press might not cover or cover well.
Oh, a few years ago, there was a story about prenatal care among blacks, that black women get less prenatal care than white women. Infant mortality rate is higher among blacks. They immediately assume that one causes the other. Now, one of the things I like to do is go back to the original source and find out what it said. I went back. On the very same page where it said that, the figures showed Mexican Americans get even less prenatal care than blacks, and they have a lower infant mortality rate than whites. So prenatal care and infant mortality rate have nothing to do with each other. If you break it down further, black women who have only a high school education, but who are married, their children have lower infant mortality rates than white women who have a college education, who are unwed mothers. So it's not race, it's not income, it's not education, it's lifestyle. When you live a certain way, there are consequences to that. The media doesn't want to accept that. Because if you say people's lifestyles have a lot to do with the outcome, then there's no room for the anointed.
Yeah, he is really like he said. Key fact of what he just said was he goes back to the original source, and that's someone who digs in and dives into research. Mm-hmm. You know, people truly have to understand the research, and like he said, the slant of how things are reported. Even in research studies, he said they left that part of the information out. Whoever reported the story. But if he didn't go back to look to find out what the research actually shows and says, he would have never gotten that fact. So you go back to the original source. That's what most people won't do. They're just going to go with the flow and go with the majority because it's popular And that's the end. That's the norm. People don't want to be the outcast. People don't want to actually think for themselves and have their own opinion about something different from what popular culture has, because that's when they get blasphemy.
Yep. And you summed it up. And you summed it up completely. And hence why certain things go out there and then we have riots and we have issues, because in the full gist of stuff hadn't been told truthfully. We only get this little bit and then we get emotional. So, no, I totally agree.
And I think, information is relative. There's so many reports, there's so many sources, and like Thomas Sowell said that, sometimes he's been wrong, about things. However, he's willing to go back and find the information and make an accurate decision and then report and write information based off facts and not just,
emotion.
Yeah, what everybody else is saying. Yeah, this was good.
That was great.
This was really good. I'm loving it.
All right, man. Like, comment, subscribe. Don't take a nosedive, and come back in the comment section below. If you want some more, let us know. We'll see you on the next one, man.
Love you guys.
Yeah.